I was gonna tell you to put it on, but I thought you knew.
You know I forget every time. FHA. FHA was the first 30-year fully amortized mortgage. Was somewhere around 1 to 3% down at that point in time. Now, think about what that meant to the average person on the street. When they went from putting 30 to 60% down and having 5 years and then having to pay it all off versus having a fully amortized mortgage, which is a much lower payment, and as long as I make my payments in 30 years, I own the place free and clear. So it's a major change. Now, a lot of people say, well, FHA is for poor people. That's not true. You can get loans FHA up in the 300s or 400s, depending on where you are.
Given that banks now offer those terms too, what's the advantage?
Was number one, low down payment.
Very low.
They are more lenient with the ratios for housing expense and total obligations.
Higher yields?
No.
You mean rates? Competitive. I've seen them higher, I've seen them lower. I think that has a lot to do with the lender.
And with the market.
Because I just, see, when FHA first started, FHA set a maximum interest rate. The lenders couldn't charge more than that. Same thing with VA, because then when they got up in the 70s, they realized that what they were trying to accomplish was make it worse, because then the lenders didn't want to lend FHA. And then you didn't have the 97 and 95% conventionals. You had 90, maybe 80 down. In the second paragraph on 286, it talks about one of the programs, which is 203B. That is the most common residential type of loan from FHA. It is for 1 to 4 family loans. Now, there's another one, I want you to be aware of it, so when you hear it, you won't be surprised. It's called 203K instead of 203B. 203K allows you to borrow money to make repairs or improvements to the property. And they obviously build that into the loan balance.
I'm sorry, what does the 203K do?
Repair or home improvements.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Does FHA make loans?
No.
The answer is no. They insure them.
I didn't know that.
When you talk about FHA, the key word is insure. When you talk about VA, the key word is guarantee. And we'll take a look at the difference between insuring a loan and guaranteeing a loan. You'll notice down the page it talks about loan insurance, lending sources, which we just talked about, the discount points and down payment. And you'll see the down payment's as low as 3.5%. Loan limit on line 29, you may want to highlight. What's the loan limit?
The time period of the loan.
What's the loan period? It depends. It's not a set number. I remember when I first started, it was always a set number, which made no sense. I'm buying a house in the middle of Kansas versus I'm buying a house in New York City area, I feel the same house would cost just a little more. So they finally realized that they had to adjust the maximum loan amounts, based on the marketplace they're in. Even in Broward, Dayton, Palm Beach, I haven't looked at the numbers lately, but generally speaking, they are not the same amount. And obviously, that's based upon, statistics of what's the average price of a home that would fall under the classification of FHA. So here's my question. If a question asks you, what's the maximum loan amount that FHA will lend, what would you say?
Yeah.
Would everybody agree that it depends on location?
The location?
Is that a yes or no?
Yes.
Answer is no, because they don't lend. Not a trick question. I gave you the damn answer and then I asked you the question.
Yes.
Are we gonna have questions like that?
Yes.
I hope so.
Oh, wow.
That's like a gift. But see, remember I told you about words? You focus on numbers. So worried about the numbers, you forget about the words with a hand someplace. Anybody? Okay, yes.
Just have a question. On FHA, you mentioned about, lending money for blighted money. In New York, they don't allow FHA on most condos. How does it work down here? Same thing?
Yeah. Because of the parameters within the rules and regs of the association, they don't meet FHA and VA standards. So they'd have to go in and basically rewrite a lot of their rules and regulations. And there's no way that most of them are going to do that. There are some here and there.
Yeah.
And for a while, they were doing an individual, rather than having the whole community qualify, they would qualify one unit. But I haven't heard them doing that in quite some time. And that type of thing, unless there's something within the local government, could be anywhere in the United States, would not have to be in Florida. Because this is a federal law, this is not a state law. At the bottom of the page, it talks about the insurance premium, and it rolls to the top of the next page. Who's going to pay this insurance premium? The lender or the borrower?
Borrower.
You sure? I'll give you a little hint. If you don't have a clue who pays for it, it ain't going to be the lender. That I know for sure.
Good clue.
I don't know if it's necessarily going to be the buyer or the seller, but I know it ain't going to be the lender. I think they charge you all those costs at closing, if I'm not mistaken, the second page of the HUD. Just check. Now, what's great about FHA is you have an upfront premium, and you have an annual premium that you pay as part of your monthly payment. And the obvious question is, where does this money go to? It goes to the insurance fund. That wouldn't be too obvious. A fund maintained by who? FHA.
You think it's
For the purpose of
protection?
reimbursing lenders who have to foreclose on you clowns because you didn't pay, and there's not enough money there to cover the outstanding debt. And unlike conventional, where at 80% and down, you can potentially eliminate the insurance. With FHA, you have that insurance premium until you pay it off. So if I pay it for 30 years, I'll pay that insurance premium for the whole 30 years. Obviously, if I refinance or sell it and pay it off, it's a different story.
Are they all the insurance premium?
Excuse me?
Are all the insurance required by law premiums in FHA?
Are they required by law?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And they're always premium, like is that?
Well, yeah, because who's gonna pay for that insurance?
No, I understand, but it's not another type of insurance.
It's not a what?
Another type of insurance besides premium.
This is insurance in case you default.
I
It
know.
says it's homeowner's insurance.
Okay.
What's it like gap coverage for a car?
No? It has nothing to do with your homeowner's insurance. Zero.
So premium is just the name,
Well, it's insurance premium.
okay.
What it's for is to protect the lender.
Yeah. No, I.
They started this insurance premium stuff so these lenders back in the 30s and 40s would be willing to do what? Make loans with low down payments for 30 years.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. As a lender, you went from 5-year loans and having them have to repay you in 5 years to low payments for 30 years.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you a question. As a lender, which one do you like better?
Second.
I like the first one better. Get my money back quicker. I'm not willing to stick my money out there for 30 years
Yeah, without.
and you're only putting down 3.5%.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to be happy you showed up.
But you got,
Now, if it isn't written just right, I can't sell it in the secondary market.
yeah, but you, in the first place, you didn't have enough volume. So in the second one, you really boomed with the volume.
Volume is not necessarily good, depending on the quality of the book.
Of course.
Because of the fact that you're right, there is big quality with it because quantity, because there's a whole lot more people that can afford it.
So that's business.
Yeah, and I see too much risk as a lender
Yeah.
in doing all those loans.
It's just
You're insured.
Well, that's why we have insurance. That's why I'm willing to do it, because the insurance is there. If the insurance was there,
They wouldn't.
a lot of lenders wouldn't be willing to do it.
Yeah.
But I think the lenders, I mean, as a lender, I would be happy to have more business.
Yeah, but.
You have a risk, of course.
It's not that simple. It's the quality.
But I don't think it's the first choice as well. I mean, you know, it's not the answer. Could be both. Or something in between.
It has
Yes,
to
please.
be in the bill.
I haven't read it yet. If, in the case of a default and foreclosure, does the FHA make the lender whole?
Yes, that's what the insurance is for.
Okay, so there's, you'd think that.
But that's why the lenders, see, you're talking about today.
Yeah,
I'm talking about 1934.
okay, no, I'm thinking today.
So you have to understand where this came from and the mentality, obviously, that has grown out of it as the years have gone by. Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of conventional loans today that are very competitive with FHA and VA. Of course, the advantages of VA is it's no money down, up to $417,000. On page 287, from lines 4 through 23, it talks about the two ratios, the housing expense ratio and the total obligation ratio. FHA is the only one that uses both of them. VA and conventional only use the total obligation. What information do I have to tell you what the housing expense ratio is?
Spend income and expenses.
You gotta be more specific.
Monthly house expense. Salary and financial obligations.
What was the
Don't-
question again? I'm sorry.
What are those obligations?
Principal,
Car.
interest,
Housing
tax.
expense is what? Principal,
Interest,
interest,
tax.
taxes, insurance, and maintenance.
Okay.
Total obligations, pull up your credit report, and there's your total obligations. But that includes principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. That's why VA and conventional have simply gone to a total obligation ratio. Of course, what kills a lot of people is your personal debt when you go for a loan.
Like if you have,
Because you got two cars at $500 each, with $1,000 a month insurance. Right there, a lot of people are killed.
Yeah.
But that's another reason to go FHA, because their total obligations, if you turn over, bottom of page 289. Notice when you compare FHA to conventional, under total obligations, I'm on page 289. It's 7% more of your income. Now, by the way, it's gross income, not net. But that does make a difference.
Huge.
So with housing expense, I take the housing expense and divide it by the gross income from the month, and that gives me the housing expense ratio. Well, I know it's going to be a percentage because my last step is always divide. Total obligations, basically is everything on your credit report, which would include your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. When you add all those together and divide it by that same monthly gross income, you have your total obligations ratio. You'll also find that in a lot of cases, FHA will be more lenient than conventional, especially when conventional gets up to the high loan to values, which is when they compete with FHA.
How important is credit rating?
Extremely important.
Credit what? Credit report?
Yeah. But to show you, there are, I see it more and more and more, these HOAs and condo associations are requiring a minimum score of 700 as one of the qualifications to be approved. Why? Because of what happened in the early 2000s when these associations weren't what? They weren't getting paid. That poses a little problem. That means they have to live off the reserves. That doesn't work too well.
What happens with international investors, so people that are buying from another
What do
country?
you mean, what happened?
In the association, if they're asking for a credit report that they don't have it here in the US.
Usually they buy in cash, so.
Yeah.
So they don't
That's
get-
why they have them put a lot of money.
How do you rent?
Sometimes, I've seen some associations require 1 year's worth of
Bank
maintenance
statement.
paid up front.
Some of them also request a presentation letter from the bank,
Mhm.
original, when they
Yeah,
bring the
bank
money.
statement from
to pay it.
at least, like 1 year.
Are non-Americans allowed to use an FHA mortgage?
Yeah. Have to meet certain guidelines, but yeah. At the bottom of page 287, when we talked about conventional, we talked about something called a due on sale clause. Meaning that the lender most likely to do what if you sell or transfer an interest in the property?
Call them that.
They're gonna call it debt. FHA and conventional don't have due on sale clauses. So they are fully assumable, assuming that the buyer can meet the qualifications. Yeah, that's at the bottom of 287. Also, all FHA contracts automatically have an appraisal contingency. Meaning if it doesn't appraise out, they can walk.
And they can walk away.
And then the top of 288,
So do you want to do anything on page 287?
no. On the top of 288, it talks about insurance commitment, insured commitment, excuse me. Here they're going back to talking about the developer again. If they want to build something that's going to qualify for FHA, that's something they want to do as a part of their approval processes to be able to do the developing start with. Around here, you're probably not gonna see a whole lot of that. Because especially right now, with most of the stuff they're building, somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million and up. Everybody's aware of the fact that there is no municipal golf course anymore. Geo Homes bought it for a couple million, like 65.
The West West?
It's the course just west of the turnpike on Glades. That's Bogo Municipal. The public golf courses are gonna be gone.
And it's talking to be membership, right?
Hmm?
Talking to be membership?
Yeah. So you better have a friend that.
I want to be one of those guys that have like the best stuff and don't even know how to play. Out there, you know.
Doesn't matter if I know how to play. I got the money, you don't.
Walking on.
Whatever. All right, on 288 at the bottom, we got VA. What's the key word in that heading on line 5? Guarantee. They don't lend, they don't insure, they guarantee. Actually, they have the capability of lending, but they don't. Let's go bracket, starting on line 13, where it says VA mortgage loan characteristics. And let's go to the bottom of the next page.
39.
In VA, who's gonna pay the insurance premium? The borrower or the lender? How many ever say borrower? Raise your hand. How many ever say the lender? Okay. Maybe it's my accent when I was over here, I get too far away. You can't hear me. I said to you, the one thing that we do know is that who's not gonna pay for it? The lender. So the next time I ask the question about who's gonna pay, you can eliminate one answer. Which only leaves one more, in most cases. So who's gonna pay the insurance premium in this VA loan?
The buyer.
No, neither one of them, because it's not insured, it's guaranteed, so there is no insurance premium. That's the second time I've got you with the same damn question, and you're worried about the math problems. Can't read. Well, that's the same problem you have with math problems, but that's in there and there. Because they don't do things like that on test.
So when it's guaranteed.
And VA does not have an insurance fund, they have a guarantee fund. There is a funding fee that the borrower pays to help keep that fund funded. And the guarantee fund serves the same purpose as the insurance fund under FHA. It's a resource where they can go and recover what they did not get back when they had to foreclose. Another reason why lenders are willing to go through FHA and VA. Also understand with FHA and VA, a lot of paperwork.
Yes.
Well, it's government programs, so you already know it's a government program. There's gonna be enough paper to choke the horse, and a real big one too. Now, what we need to talk about right now, before I do that, sort of jump around, but I want to do things in a little different order. On page 289, line 15, there are no loan limits in VA. FHA does set the maximum loan amount, but that varies from area to area. VA does not have a set loan amount. What they base what they'll do on is how much they'll guarantee. Now that goes back to line 4. The maximum entitlement, or a guarantee, that word entitlement means that you guarantee. So the magical number there is 104,250. I told you that the maximum insurable loan amount
It's for how many, 17,000.
under VA. In other words, if I have all of my benefits and I can meet the guidelines, the ratios, and the income and so on and so forth, I can get up to $417,000, no money down, VA loan. As a lender, how would you like to make that loan?
Yeah, no good.
No money down,
No, nothing.
No, thank you.
and almost $500,000. However, we got a guarantee there.
Back on the government.
No, backed by the borrowers, that funding fee. So you think it's the government that's providing this? It's the people using the program. Because in FHA, you pay the insurance premium, which goes into the fund in case they need the money. Here, it's not called a funding, insurance premium, fund, because it isn't insurance. It's a guarantee. When you guarantee something, you're giving a precise number to it, right? Okay. The maximum guarantee is 104,250. That's the max guarantee. Assuming that you fit all the guidelines. Now, this person defaults the day after closing. And the bank has to foreclose to recover the $417,000. Forgetting costs and stuff, what's the maximum that they have to sell this property for to get back their $417,000?
Three minus
317.
4.
That's how much they'd have to sell it for, forgetting closing costs and all that stuff, attorney's fees. That's what they'd have to sell it for, because $104,250,000 of it is guaranteed. Here's the deal. As long as this number represents at least 25% of the loan amount, you can get in with no money down. And the lender's maximum risk is 75%. There are very few lenders that won't go for 75%. Now, let me,
Sure, we're not behind the wall for you tomorrow. I can put that behind the wall for you tomorrow. I think I'm off.
well, there's a little problem. That cord is used from time to time. So it needs to be tucked up underneath there before they can pull it down. So let's say I wanna buy a $500,000 home, and I wanna go I'm sorry, I wanna go VA.
You would put down the difference.
How much would you have to put down?
Twenty-
No,
No?
not 83.
I don't know.
25% of 83.
Because
And then the lender's maximum exposure on that additional 83,000 would be 75%. So you can buy a house for 500,000 and go VA, but you're gonna have to put down,
25%.
not 75,
21.
25. So the difference between this number and that number is 83,000. Somebody tell me what 25% of that is?
$20,750.
Which would have to be, now, this would be, as long as you don't exceed this, it's zero money down. This is 20,000 down. Because the lender's risk never exceeds 75%. But when I do that, I've defeated one of the main reasons that I went VA was what? I'd have to come up with $27,000. So you understand when they said there's no maximum loan amount. You can borrow whatever you want to. Once you get over 417, you can't get in with zero money down. Are we okay? That's it. Page 290.
So, yes, I have a question. So this maximum guarantee amount varies depending on the value of the house.
Yeah.
Always keeping the 25%.
So all you have to remember is 20, as long as 25% doesn't exceed 104,000, then you know you can get in with no money down. Reality, which they don't go into in the book, there's a scale with those numbers.
Is the guarantee cost high?
I'm sorry?
Is the guarantee cost the VA charges high?
What do you mean?
Don't they pay something up front? to-
No,
part
they
of
don't.
the loan?
No, they don't pay anything up front.
There's no, the same way that the FHA, the borrower has to pay an insurance premium, the VA person doesn't have to pay anything.
You'll notice the chart on 290. I'm not gonna talk about is the funding fee, there is no upfront like FHA. Because when you talk about the mortgage insurance, you got, the first one is the upfront MIP. But that little figure, 13.3, is a good source of quick review of the difference between the two of them.
Are there any stars in what we've done today?
No. Oh, I lied. On page 288. Under the characteristics of VA, bottom of the page is a star. And lines 1 through 10 are part of the star.
lending source and the.
Where's
Starting with line 13 on 288,
Okay.
going to line 10 on the next page.
Yeah.
It starts from 13 to 110.
That's usually me, today it's you. That's so funny.
Oh, can I have the sign? You have the sign sheet?
Yes, it's right there. Anybody else need to sign?
Yeah. You're fine. I was like, okay, I got you. You're welcome. When we go to drag race event, I'll buy the first tank of NOS for you.
I wouldn't raise it. I wouldn't want to get a scratch on it.
I know. I'll get you that wires.
Thanks, sir. On the board, I put two terms, which actually covers probably about 3 or 4 pages. We'll look at the pages in a minute. Who are the main participants in the primary mortgage market?
In the primary?
Banks, commercial banks.
Yeah.
All right, lenders
Builders. And buyers.
and borrowers. Except we don't call them lenders and borrowers. We call them,
You're late.
we call them,
Lenders and then deeds.
I don't want that.
You just got it? You got the stove. Yeah, you got the stove. Randy's so.
Who's the mortgagee?
Banks.
The lenders, the lenders.
And who's the mortgagor?
The
Borrowers.
borrowers.
And what are the assets we're talking about?
The house, the real estate.
The money lent.
The money, I don't use the money. That is need to come.
Not the money,
The assets,
the mortgage
the mortgage.
and the note, or the assets.
It's an interesting way of
The
defining.
house is the collateral, not the asset. Because without the asset, you don't touch the real property.
The mortgage and.
Because the mortgage and the note is what gives the holder of that document the power, not the collateral that's put up with it. What does the lender do in this whole scenario of primary mortgage market?
Lends the money.
He says marketing and sales.
Provides the money for the mortgage. And or
Originate a mortgage, or you need a mortgage.
What's another name for mortgagee?
Buyer.
No,
No,
seller, the
That's
lender.
E-R-O-R.
ER is the one that
Lender.
lends money or sells.
The grantor gives the money, the grantee is the mortgage.
The OR is the buyer.
And I have to live with it.
And you do it over and over again.
Yeah.
I never been different.
Obviously, I must be a little bit.
I promise you, high school's no
Looking for
different still.
forgery.
Huh?
High school, college, it's still no different. You'll find the same thing there. It don't matter.
No, college and high school are easier.
No.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah, I'm talking, don't tell me I'm talking 44 years. When you teach for 44 years, you can have an opinion.
I was just in
Until
class.
then, you don't have one. Adults are more difficult because adults' egos are much more
yeah.
fragile than kids.
Yes.
I have to be very careful not to piss off an adult, because that's the end, I've lost it. They're gone. They may be there physically, but they're not there mentally anymore. Kids, 10 minutes later, they don't remember it happened. Well, you see it, you know, those who have kids, how many times have they had a fight with their best friend and was never gonna speak to them again in their entire life? 15 minutes later, they're strutting down the street together. That's why when I go to seminars, I sit in the back of the room. Not really to pay attention to the person up front because they've heard the same song and dance 8,000 times, but to watch the people and watch the type of things that gets their attention. Actually, Howie Mandel is my mentor. Not from the joke standpoint. Watch the crowd when he's in good high gear. They are totally,
Engaged. Yeah,
because if you're trying to get a message across, whatever it is, whether it's a joke or whether it's, you know, the shit that we're dealing with, you have to have people's attention. That goes back to mom saying, what? Look at me, I'm talking to you.
Right.
And I always thought that was the stupidest thing until I started teaching, then I understood why. You know, if I can't see your eyes, your ears don't work. Because your brain's off somewhere else.
Okay, can you ask the question?
Yes, who are the main participants in the primary mortgage market? Right. Who makes the loan?
The
Mortgagee.
mortgagee. The mortgage.
What's the mortgagor do?
Receive. The buyer.
No, award means give. What is the borrower giving?
Oh, the mortgage,
The commitment,
The paper.
the paper. the
I've told
notes.
you over and over and over again that ORDE is not much money. I mean, one of these days, it's gonna dawn on you that money is not what you should be focusing on, even with the stupid math problems.
Is the notes.
The mortgage and the note, which are the assets created in the relationship between the mortgagor and the mortgagee. Now, we've already talked about the secondary market. As a lender, I may not want to be a portfolio lender, meaning I don't want to hold on to my mortgage and notes. I want to do what? I want to find some investor to sell them to. There are a lot of the banks and savings associations from up north who invest in real estate in Florida. They go into the secondary market and buy the mortgage and notes. It's cheaper to do that than it is to come down here, meet the qualifications to function within the state of Florida, and then have to have offices. So there are a lot of lenders out there that do more buying and selling than they do lending. I had a gentleman in class 15 years ago, he worked for a mortgage company. They make loans. They service loans. To the tune of $5 billion when he first left the company. And this was 15, 20 years ago. Not one of those mortgages and notes belonged to that mortgage company. It's like the illustration I gave with my loans. I have never had any communication with people that actually physically have my mortgage and note. Mellon Bank. The only the only communications I would ever have with them would be with their attorneys, with something called a lis pendens. Meaning what? They're about to foreclose. The secondary market,
How do they make money?
printed,
No. My question is, when you buy a primary loan, a mortgage, and the note,
who's you?
and then,
Who is you?
the secondary market.
The investor?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they buy it,
Uh-huh.
and then how do they make money? Then they resell it
Well,
and then charge.
how they make money is you make your mortgage payments.
Okay, yeah, but that is happening in the first scenario.
Well, the first scenario, there's no lending going on in the secondary market. The primary market is one of the lendings made. If I don't have a source to be able to sell my existing mortgage and notes and get cash, how do I continue to lend money? I don't. See, that was the problem with FHA. Banks were running out of money to lend because so many more people could afford to buy, and they were keeping, and the loans were for a longer period of time. So that combination meant they were running out of money to lend. Not that they were gonna go bankrupt, but they would not be able to make the loans that were there. Now, what does the government do when one program causes a problem? They create another one. It's called Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae was initially created to buy FHA mortgage and notes so the local lenders would have more money to lend. And when VA came out, then Fannie Mae also bought the VA loans, or mortgage and notes, not loans. I'll give you an example. I have a personal example of a primary and a secondary market. I grew up on a farm. The primary market were piglets and baby calves. That was our asset. And we used to go to the stock market to sell them so we could make money.
And stockyards?
Yep.
And you said the piglets?
You can make bank off bacon. Like, if you really think about it.
There's a whole lot to
Like,
this
if you
story,
really
but
think about it.
some of it's a little gross, so we won't go there.
I didn't know they ate piglets.
They don't. Here's what happened. We had
Rib tips, right?
Morsons and can't think of the name now, and sows. And they used to breed, and we had litters of pigs. We keep them maybe a month or 2 months, and we then wean them off the mom. We put them in a big pen, and when they get to about 200, 220, we put them on the truck and take them to the stock market.
So you ate good growing up.
So they kidding me, I'd stay 3 or 4 times a
So you
week.
didn't
That's
sell
good.
them small?
Good deal.
Hmm?
You didn't sell them when they were
No,
small, when
no.
they were already big, so.
But see, it's a perfect example of this, because the creating the asset was having the piglet.
And where is the secondary market in that case?
Secondary market is stockyard. Because we took our asset and sold it to investors.
So if,
Because you know there are farmers out there who buy baby calves or hogs, and they put them in these big feed lots.
Yeah.
And they feed them until they get to a certain weight, and then they sell them to the slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
That's a sight too. I was in one time, that was enough.
yeah, they're crazy. What about if you were a horse breeder? Then you
Same difference.
It's the same thing, right?
You're creating an asset, and then you turn around and selling it. It's called capitalism.
Yeah, but can you do it in like a residential neighborhood? Like for instance, Equus, you can have horses in your backyard up to 4.
Right.
So if I was breeding them and I'm making 50 to 70 grand off each little pony I sell,
Mhm.
can I put that on the same type of principle for that property, even though it's in like where it's at?
Depends on what zoning ordinances would allow.
Okay.
There's a whole lot to that process.
I know, I want a house in there so bad, that's my goal. 3 years. Buying a house in there.
At the bottom of page 291, they talk about the primary mortgage market. Highlight the heading, primary mortgage market, and then lines 22 and 23, the first sentence. No start.
22 and 23.
Then if you turn the page and look at the next 2 pages, you'll see the main participants in the primary market. These you'd be more familiar with than Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and these other investors. But you have to realize that some of the people on this page that operate in New York or Montana are buying mortgages and notes from properties in Florida.
Where's called Fannie Mae? It's like,
Its initial name was Federal National Mortgage Association.
Well, let's just call it Fannie Mae.
And they, I don't know, one day they decided Fannie Mae sounded good, so. And then there's Freddie Mac and Ginnie Mae.
Yeah, Freddie Mac.
Seriously,
Yeah, right here, so they're all
we're
from.
gonna get to them.
Right here.
That's me.
So it was a brother and 2 sisters.
Are they as popular as they used to be back then? Fannie Mae?
I'm sorry?
Are they as popular as they used to be? Fannie Mae? I don't know.
Yeah, well, Fannie Mae, I understand Fannie Mae does not make loans. They set the standards that the lenders have to follow if they want to be able to sell a mortgage and notes. If you look at a residential loan application, at the bottom of the page, you'll see the initials of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And when we talk about the appraisal, they also define what market value is. So in residential, between Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, they have a major impact upon what happens to loans that we go for to buy a home or a condo or whatever the case may be.
Some interesting names.
I used to have a great routine, but when they changed everything, it screwed it up. Because it used to be savings and loans, not savings associations. Freddie Mac used to hang out with Sally and Lucy. There was more to it, but never mind.
Okay.
And I picked that up because that was around the time of Miami Vice. For those of you that remember Miami Vice.
Oh, yeah, that Testarossa was serious.
But that's where I got the routine idea from.
Should have been my advice for Halloween.
All right, over on page 294, it talks about the secondary mortgage market. You probably want to highlight lines 1 through 4.
no, it starts.
No, stop. Not yet. At the bottom of the page, where it says government-sponsored enterprises,
Fannie Mae.
that's Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and Ginnie Mae. Let's go brackets starting with line 25 to 45. No, line 5 through 46, 45. The heading is government-sponsored enterprise. I'm on page 294, line 25 to the bottom of the page. And then on page 295, lines 1 through 32. No, you can skip a blank at the bottom.
No, it starts.
Line 18 on page 295 has a star.
Just the 18?
18. Mortgage-backed securities, isn't that what went down the tubes a few years ago?
See, Fannie Mae started out as a government
And the
agency.
other thing,
And then, up in the 60s, 70s, it became a private corporation. And then in the early 2000s, it went under
Under what?
The water.
in the water.
Ah, yeah, bankrupt.
Some,
Okay.
And the government took them back over.
Mm.
Apparently, they're doing okay at this point. Fannie Mae was originally created to deal with FHA and then VA for banks. Freddie Mac in the 1970 was created to support savings and loans, which we now call Savings Association. That means that Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae were always competing with each other. I remember at one point, probably 20 years, I was working part-time for a mortgage company. And every morning, we would go up and meet with the pricing manager. And I found it fascinating. When you looked at on his desk, he had two screens. That screen was Freddie Mac's pricing, and this screen was Fannie Mae's pricing, which dictated what interest rates we offered you guys as agents during the day. We knew we would always get a text, not a text message, pager would go off at 3 o'clock. Why 3 o'clock? Stock market closed. Because at that point, they didn't want to, depending on what it looked like tomorrow morning was going to be, they would either tell us to lock in rates if we could, or don't lock in rates. But there's a perfect example of the secondary market influencing the primary market. Because if the primary market does not create an asset that meets the guidelines of the secondary investors, they won't buy it. And in residential, if Fannie Mae won't buy it, I don't think any other investor, for the most part, is going to buy them, unless they buy them at a discount. So you've seen, you may not know who Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are, but you felt their presence. Right down to the parameters that you have to qualify for a loan. See, a lot of that's not being created by that lender. It's been dictated by that secondary market. Why? Why is the secondary market dictating to the primary market?
Because they go
They are not
buy.
gonna
Because the secondary market has the money
Yeah.
that the primary market needs. So if I'm not mistaken, those with the gold set the rules.
Yep.
Ginnie Mae was created to take over some of the functions of Fannie Mae. One of them is this mortgage-backed security. These are government loans that create securities from the repayment of those mortgages. So what would happen to the value of those securities if the people weren't making their payments?
Government loans.
Would go down. So Ginnie Mae is there to make sure that doesn't happen.
So it's the government loans that repay.
Mhm.
That's where it comes from. Really?
Yep. So a mortgage-backed security means something is creating the security for that security. That something is the repayment of those loans. But then there's a problem. Then there's a policing action that has to take place. That's Ginnie Mae. She's like mom.
So do you mean it's the mom?
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were out on the street corner trying to make money. That was part of my routine. It was good. People remember it. Couldn't remember what it was about, but they remembered the story. Okay. Bottom of page 297. Says laws regarding fair credit and lending procedures. The first one, highlight lines 30 to 35. I just thought it was.
Which page?
297.
297?
ECOA is what they call it. Equal Credit Opportunity Act. What's important in that paragraph is who are the protected class of people when it comes to loans. You'll notice there are ones in there that are not in fair housing. Like marital status, age, and receipt of income from public assistance programs. I remember that my wife's grandfather got a 30-year loan at 72. Well, actually 82.
Wow.
How he got that?
To be very
Because he met all the qualifications. If I meet all the qualifications,
So they can.
you have to give me a loan.
They can.
You can't discriminate because of my age. Well, unless I was an a 16-year-old or a 5-year-old, I'm not qualified by law to contract.
So in that case, if you die 5 years later,
Your estate is responsible for all debts on it.
the state?
Your estate,
State.
meaning your grandfather died like that and you're the heirs, you have to figure out what to do with that mortgage. That's the other thing that's fun about the reverse mortgage. I mean, mom and dad are spending your inheritance.
Then you end up paying for it.
Because simple way to describe a reverse mortgage, what's the normal way? The borrower pays the lender.
Right.
What's the reverse of that? That's a reverse mortgage. You are living off your equity.
But he's not literally paying you, he's just not.
Yes, he's literally paying you. Yes. Sometimes in a sum up front, other times it's monthly payments. But what's the problem with that?
He gets the house.
When it
At a
goes,
certain point,
it's gonna be cash. You don't have no money.
so they're gonna put a cap on how much equity has to be there. Some of the programs when they first started, the lender would lend it to you until you kicked, and then it was the lender's. You had to be 72 and in bad health. You were more qualified at that point. But I mean, that's like a joke. I just realized the last time I talked, and I'm old enough to qualify for those jobs. On page 298, that chart at the top is not a star, but it's a good review of the different fair housing, Civil Rights Act of 1866, and this ECOA. On line 7, it talks about the Consumer Credit Protection Act contains Title I, which is the Truth in Lending Act. However, that name has changed a little bit because of this Dodd-Frank
Yeah, they just
Act.
get away with it.
Yeah? It'll be interesting to see where they go next.
Yeah.
This highlighter.
Does that mean there's no more truth in lending?
Yeah, there's truth in lending.
If there's no dog friend.
Not trying to truth in lending.
You're still gonna have that aspect of it, it's just gonna work with it. What does this act deal with? Truth in lending. That's probably why they call it the, in other words, you know that anytime you borrow money, you get a sheet that tells you the, annual percentage rate, or the annual yield. It tells you how much you borrow, how much your interest is gonna be over the life of the loan, and then the total amount that you pay. And then right below it, it would tell you what your payments would be. It's called, we used to call it truth in lending statement. Because in the past, nobody knew what that was, and it changed as the wind. Now, if it changes too much, there's a built-in period of time up to 10 days where they have to re-disclose to the borrower what the closing costs are. Because what was happening was, you'd get to the closing and all of a sudden there'd be all this extra stuff there that you were never told about. But it's at closing. And when you're looking at the whole thing, it's not that much money. If you look down the road at how much money the lenders were actually gleaning off of that they shouldn't have, it was millions and billions. So the idea behind this is if you tell me one thing and it's gonna change, then you gotta re-disclose to me, which opens the door for me to do what? Back away. Now, one thing that I did forget to tell you, they changed the spelling of lending. Why did I change that to lending? Because regulation Z is what controls truth in lending, which you'll see mentioned in the paragraph. Anytime you talk about these kinds of laws, they always deal with some sort of disclosure. The truth in lending or regulation Z requires 3 things to be disclosed. It's at the bottom of the page. The finance charges, the amount financed, and the total payments. If I'm not mistaken, that's what I just said. You may want to put a bracket around lines 20 through 4 on the next page. And they gave an illustration of lending, to the lending disclosure on top of page 299. Also on page 299, let's put a bracket around lines 3 through 29. On page 299, starting with line 13, which says 229. Lines 20 through 24 have a star. A builder is advertising the fact that they have mortgages available. And the financing is anywhere from 4% to 8%. Would that require full disclosure? According to what we just put a star beside that?
Yes.
Why?
Makes a big difference in the loan.
Because I used a number. What if I just said low down payments? What if I just said low interest rates?
Yes, you have to disclose them.
No. If I said interest rates as low as 4%, then I would have to. No money down.
So you're referring to advertising as opposed to closing?
Numbers.
Both.
So you say a
Don't you
number,
have to disclose all of that at the closing?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm confused.
You have to disclose it before closing. If you use any of those trigger words and you give a percentage. That's why you hear it on the radio with cars. They tell you about the financing, and then there's blah, 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 blah. That's the disclosure. Because nothing in the law says that you have to understand what I'm saying, I just have to say it.
That's right.
Or if you see an ad, it has an asterisk beside of that 8% or $1,000 down and move in, and then it explains it at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
That's from Truth in Lending. Yeah, of course,
Magnifying glass.
which is a joke.
Yes.
I mean, we don't talk about cars, but it's the same type of requirement.
They just want you to get there.
Yeah.
I have just signed the note and mortgage for a home equity loan. The next day, I changed my mind, I don't want the loan. Can I get out of it? I have, how many days? Wrong. 3 what? Business days, not 3 days, 3 business days. That could be more than 3. Because if you got it on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you still got 3 more days. And if Monday was a legal holiday,
So we have a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. All week? To think about it.
that's why if you've ever done that, you went in and signed the papers, and the check was in the folder, but they didn't give it to you. Why? Because they know you have 3 business days to come back and say, I don't want it. So why should they go through the process of letting you cash the thing, and then, and then tracking you down?
So they formalize everything after the 3rd day.
No, everything's formalized the day you sign. Now, the money is yours, whether you like it or not, at the end of the 3rd business day, unless you put them on notice.
So do they delay, recording the deed for 3 days for that reason?
There would be any deed. Already own the property, there's no deed.
I'm sorry, mortgage lien.
Oh, the mortgage one, yeah. Yeah, because of the fact that you have the right to walk away, yes. They would sign the mortgage and note after that. Because it wouldn't make any sense not to. Because of the fact that you walk back in there, there's an extra document there that you sign if you want to reject the loan. If you don't sign that and return it to them by the end of the 3rd business day, the loan's yours. That was at the bottom of the page. And actually continue to the top of the next page. Now, just want to make sure that you're. Then we get to the other law that's always associated with truth in lending, and this is the Real Estate Settlements Procedure Act. This is the law that regulates your closing statement. Truth in lending regulated your lending, your borrowing. This one, it says Real Estate Settlements Procedure Act. Is this for real estate settlements? Would this be applicable to buying your car?
No.
You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, because first two words are what?
Real estate.
And the third one?
Settlement.
Now, I never realized it, but up north, they never referred to them as closing statements. They always referred to them as settlement statements. Until recently, with these new changes with the Dodd-Frank, or what's happened after that, they've gone back to referring to them as settlement statements. Used to have your good faith estimate. It's not called a good faith estimate anymore. It's called a loan estimate, which actually is a more precise term, because that estimate is what it's going to cost you to get this loan. Well, let's put a bracket on page 300 from line 6, where it says Real Estate Settlement Procedure Act, whole page.
The whole page?
Yes. And the next page. And 302, next page.
No, sir.
No, sir. Now, again, a lot of this stuff we talked about, we just didn't bring Raspberry into it. The one that I'm most concerned with at this point is the affiliated business relationship. All brokers in the United States that have affiliated companies, that affiliation must be disclosed by federal law. Especially if you're receiving any monetary benefit from that relationship, which of course we are. So we have a form that we created with the company attorney to disclose the affiliated relationships that we have, like Signature Title, like First Trust Mortgage, like Signature Insurance Advisors, all the different companies. That must be disclosed in writing. Which means every time you work with a buyer, seller, landlord, or tenant, you're going to be presenting that document to them. And what do you think the first thing you should tell them is? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there is a federal law called the Real Estate Settlements Procedure Act. It requires all real estate agents in the country to disclose any relationship we have with affiliated businesses. During my presentation, I went through all those different affiliated businesses. The purpose of this disclosure form is to make you aware of these relationships because it's required by law. It does not obligate you in any way to use any of these companies. Please sign here acknowledging that I gave you this information. You need to learn that when something is dictated by a specific law, that when you go to explain it to your customer, you always lead in with the fact that it's federal law, like lead-based paint.
You can eat it.
Any real estate agent who is dealing with a property that's built prior to 1978 has this same requirement. See, I want the world to know that what? Any other company or agent you work with that does not make these disclosures, they're in violation of either state or federal law. I want them to know that. And this isn't something my broker made up to aggravate the shit out of you. Because the number of disclosures that exist out there that we have to deal with on a daily basis is 10 times what it used to be. The contract people used to be 2 pages.
No, it's more like.
1 page was the actual contract. The second page was the standard of real estate practices. That was the whole contract. There were no addendums. Now the basic contract is 12 pages. Anywhere from another 4 or 5 to 10 addendums.
At what time can you suggest to use one of those affiliated companies, or you can't? Because
Yes,
it's
you can do it anytime.
So after.
If you're gonna offer the services, you need to do the disclosure. Well, let's put it this way. If you're a buyer, you're gonna go to our lender and get pre-approved. You're not get your ass in my car.
What are some of the
Do I need to
affiliated?
present the advantages of using the affiliates company?
I give you 2 guesses, and the first one don't count. The company receives monetary benefit from it, which means all this free shit you get around here, that you shouldn't be getting. Where do you think that money comes from? It doesn't fall out of the sky. So if you don't support the affiliate businesses, why should the company support you?
So there's a title company and escrow, what else?
Mortgage,
Insurance.
insurance,
Mortgage insurance.
Conglomerate.
What kind of insurance?
we have all kinds, everything you can think of.
You mean like property
Yeah,
insurance?
You have property insurance?
definitely property insurance, homeowners insurance. But we have health insurance.
What do you break?
And you sell that?
I don't sell it, no. I'm not an insurance person.
Well-
These are affiliated companies, not the company I work for. It's another service I offer my customer.
So the broker,
It's not, I don't work for that company. That company is affiliated with the real estate company.
That is smart.
when you work for the broker just wants you to disclose that to your customer.
Your broker doesn't care. RESPA does. And quite honestly, RESPA trumps the broker.
It's RASPA.
They don't have
Real
a,
estate settlement procedure.
they don't have a coercion, thing that you have to sign there because when there's a mortgage lender,
Mhm.
they cannot suggest to go to any specific insurance or something
Right.
like that. But it's not-
That's why RESPA requires us to make that disclosure, so that we can offer those services.
Okay.
Interesting.
Well, you know, in the past, that happened. All kinds of money floated under the table. Private insurance companies and title companies and mortgage companies.
So they just want you to do that so the customer is aware, basically.
Well, that's usually what a disclosure is for.
Yeah, to be aware that that is what is happening.
All right, let's go over to page 303. 303, please. On 303, let's put a bracket from line 1 to the bottom of the page.
Federal, regular,
And then on page 304, bracket. Open.
Highlights, stars, nothing,
No,
nothing interesting.
Everything's interesting. It's just not on the class test.
No, very important, not interesting.
Everybody bring their other book with them tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
I like this, it's a nice house.
It's okay.
Isn't that in Palm Beach?
I have no idea where it's because it wasn't published in Palm Beach. Has anybody ever heard the term the Fed?
And
The Fed, F-E-D, which stands for
federal
Reserve System. What's the purpose of the Fed?
Manage the money supply of the.
dictate,
Manage the money supply. It is the national bank. It sets the monetary policy for the country, as you'll see on the first page. No, the first page of the two I just had you highlight. Bracket. Thank you, 303. Now, the question is this. It says they control the money supply with their monetary policy. So the question is, what's their monetary policy?
Interest rates.
interest rate, basically.
Interest rates.
Cost of money.
The availability and the cost of money.
To banks, the lenders.
The availability and cost of money.
I'm so.
And credit to national.
First thing they do is buy and sell treasury notes. The second thing that they do is they control the interest rate that member banks have to pay to borrow money, because as a consumer, I cannot go to the Federal Reserve Bank and do anything.
So money supply increase.
They don't even let me in the front door.
You can take a tour of it in Boston.
Tour means somebody's guiding you. You can't just walk in.
It was fascinating.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I'd like to go to Fort Knox.
Yes.
Yeah.
That to me would be fascinating.
Yes.
And then Area 51.
Yeah. But the rest of them are too young to know what Area 51 is.
What?
I know.
You kidding me?
I
I've been trying to date that place
No,
with like internet.
Here it is.
If you go on Google Earth, it doesn't let you look over it.
And the third thing they do is control the reserve requirement.
Yeah.
Now, let's start with the first one that's at the bottom of, what, 303?
That's where Tupac's at.
It probably is. Among the others.
It talks about open market operations. That is the buying and selling of the treasury notes. If the Fed buys treasury notes from investors, what will it do to the money supply? Will it increase it or decrease it? It will increase it, because the money supply is not the money that the Fed has. The money supply is the money available in the marketplace for the consumer. And by them buying those securities back from the investors, what's going out into the market? Cash. Now, if they sell securities, that means the investors out there are going to do what? Buy those securities, which means now the Fed has that money, not the marketplace. What would increasing the discount rate do to the money supply?
It would reduce lending.
It would reduce it. Why? Well, using the things go up, it costs more, and less people buy them. And reserve requirement is to prevent 1929. Because the bad thing about 29 was not the crash of the stock market. We've had worse crashes than that. It's the run on the bank. And because of the laws at that point, the banks were told, your customer comes in and wants their money, you give them their money. Until there ain't no money to give. And there's the crash. That's enough. This is my routine. There's nothing else to say.
Oh, okay, I thought we were going in depth.
If I had a college course time, yes, I would go into depth. Although I'll get more shots
Is
at
there a star highlight on this, nothing?
No.
Would you like one?
So there are 3 monetary policies that the Federal Reserve has to control the money supply. That's the buying and selling of the treasury notes, which they call open market operations. There is the controlling of the discount rate, which is the interest rate charged member banks for borrowing funds, and the reserve requirements, exactly what it sounds like. Banks have to hold a certain percentage of their deposits on reserve. That's why they will tell you, we don't have $10,000 to give you today. You wanna know why? I had a vice president of savings loans in my class one time. And it was interesting talking to him because you're talking to someone who looked at it from a wholly different perspective. And he said the reason that they don't keep banking money in the bank like they used to was it cut down on the number of people who tried to steal it. And those vaults are damp and the money would mold. But that's why you go in and you want $10,000, depending on the time of day and stuff, or how much money was allocated that day to the bank or the savings social and credit union, they may tell you we'll have to get the money.
They also don't pay enough insurance to have a lot of money in there.
Right,
It's not covered.
right. So the money's stored somewhere. Probably at breaks and places like that. Okay. Or what?
What?
Okay, and anybody didn't sign, make sure you sign. And, they work?
When you come back, I just want to remember that's not going to register already for the exam.
Yeah, you should, because you wait until the class is over. You may have to wait a week or two to find a place.
You have to do it now? You know where? I have no clue. Go ahead, that's we got it. You have it.
No, I don't have it.
But I have yours.
Yeah, that's why I have the wrong one.
Okay, where would you call now? Okay, so, 305. 790. 14.
Yeah, I saw it, I make sure I have
To the email that they sent you, or? Why I don't? Let me see, why I don't have that email? You sure? Let me see, Archie.
So, your name?
If you're ready,
Oh, this one?
it's better that way because it'll be that much money.
Ben? Oh, okay. Okay.
Is this one the email that they sent? Yes. Balance, right?
Yeah, Alex Brewer, L-U-E-R. So,
Look, I'm doing it right now, let's see if I can do it. Lo voy a hacer ahorita porque A-L-E-X.
yeah, and last name, L-U-E-R.
So then I go here to the test taker site? Yes. Test taker site?
What are you taking, next day?
Here. My name? Enter the name. What? Real first addresses down. That's why.
Let's go. You think we're gonna arrive on time or what?
I think so, I'm just across the street, there is a gas station.
Ah, yeah.
Not really. Really? Basic stuff, there was more emphasis on other things. But it's not so emphasized here. A lot of it is in truth and lending and in discrimination. That was huge. I mean, we've gone over it and that was really very prevalent. Yeah. Not the way you have it. Take a little trusty scissor and I'll just. No, I didn't. The ones I threw out were probably the ones I didn't ask the question about. It's, you know,
No, it wasn't no 2 times though, 1 time I had school week.
the contest that you're gonna take. So.
Okay, no, actually,
That will make sense when you.
that was because I was so good, so y'all about to keep bringing it down, so then down
I have to tell
there.
you, that time changed the testing. It was like such a big, I don't know what. There's so much pressure. So, actually, just had
We're gonna try to keep chasing her.
And I said, well, I'm not, but this is. I'm going to put myself.
Let me see very badly. Yeah, I tried. Over the Halloween.
That's it. Either now or never. So, then why did you do that?
And so I bought two bags of candy and you giving and you take everybody should back at home the same stuff, you know, and my daughter going and everybody, you know, like I'm giving them everything, take it, and you're empty, and she can't take it. Oh, back. So it's really, so I'm eating, and I'm eating.
This is a lot of torture, but it always isn't. Oh, I can imagine, I know. That's funny. I don't know. A lot of it is going away.
How you doing?
Good. They're going to Rory's playground.
I'm in advance. We're on the, that's why I missed out.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, Rory's taking Wednesday too.
I know. I even got a trainer class. My trainer was amazing. It was great. Let me finish it. So now that I know, you know, like, my problem is I'm going, like, I'm eating all day, you know, and go to the dish, and then you have something good and your mom say, oh, hey, I cook. And so, you know, and this time I need to walk, we have like a candy thing. So then I'm passing, you like grabbing, you know, all of them, you know.
I don't know.
And pass 20 times a day after the you
All I know is that it's so annoying.
So, I just, I'm just not
because I had to take some pills.
Yeah, when I wanna walk, and
See, this is me in Georgia before I came.
Tomorrow, I have the closing on that little condo.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm excited. When you start working, when renovations will start I want to be able to sit there and walk it within a month.
Wow. Yeah, that was before I moved here, not so long ago.
You're painting? Oh, a lot, I'm doing a lot. In the kitchen, the wall, making it more of a concept.
No, just, you already know it's not late now. So I was doing.
Yeah, no, yeah, I know.
Not too much.
Okay, you've done it before. In my own house, not in this development, but in my own house. I renovated it. I've done it before, I did it for a couple of years ago.
yeah.
To get it to your, I don't know, I'm not sure, because this needed like a whole new kitchen and probably it's a home. Oh, not the show, just like, yeah. Well, I think, no, it's very good.
Just in case.
I
And
can-
came to give it, I said, hey.
He hasn't said it, I can live it, so I just want to look you.
That's good. Yes. Don't let you touch me.
It's the biggest.
They show you how to. Wow.
The problem's gone.
Something else, you know.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
Who is it?
All slackers.
Big man walk. Alright, next chapter.
Read this one. Oh, you got a cake?
Somebody.
Ay, Dios mío.
You want us to bring the other book today?
Yes. Don't let me forget to go over.
That's sort of why I mentioned it, because it's too damn heavy to carry otherwise.
You won't have to get it.
So we just need this.
Yes.
I gotta get mine done.
And this.
Yes.
No. So it's something. I need extra regular.
Yeah.
I can't afford the front, but I can afford a big ass thing.
It's for sale, so my house looks up like that.
It's taking like, wait a minute. Hold on. I'm not done. It's taking you 10 minutes. Yo, I haven't gone done meeting.
Alright, let's get started.
I would agree.
Let's go to page 310.
That word is from different pronouns. Mortgage. No.
Mortgage sheet. That's easier than mortgage sheet.
Found the wings.
Page 310, please. Any other questions? Pages 310 and 311 deal with fractions, decimals, and percentages. If I have to go with that, go find your grandkid that's 2 years old, they'll be glad to help you. Let's go to page 312. Page 12 has a star.
It's all sales commission.
What page did you say? 312. That's it.
312.
All right. Get registered after a second.
The whole thing.
The whole page has a star?
I said page 3 what?
Well,
Did I say except for?
no.
Okay, then I have a feeling that would be the whole page.
Thank you, sir.
Now, the reason I'm not gonna spend any time with this is it only requires you to be able to do basic arithmetic and be able to read. Since I haven't been able to seem to get you so you can read, I'm just gonna skip that part. I warn you when it comes to math problems, that the first thing you have to do is read through the whole question without a pen or pencil in your hand, and especially not a calculator. When you pick up that calculator, you turn off your brain. I'm trying to show you how to set up these problems, but you're too busy pushing buttons to look at the concept. The bad thing about the sales commission is the formula is the question. A property was recently sold for $100,000. The commission was 6%, and the sales associate is on a 40% split with their broker. How much was the broker's commission? Well, 100,000 times 6% is 60,000.
6,000.
Now all of a sudden you can do math. All right, so I know the whole commission is 6,000. Now, am I looking for the sales associates portion or the brokers? Because they tried to be slick and tell you the percentage that was the sales associate, but then ask you how much of it was the brokers. Well, if the sales associate was 40%, I'm gonna take a wild guess that the broker is 60. And 60 times 6,000, is around 3,600. My point is, in these type of questions, they lay it out in front of you. You just have to be careful to make sure you read it correctly. See, that would be a perfect example of where you would get the wrong answer doing the right thing. Because obviously to figure out the commission, it's a percentage of the sales price. And then you already know before you get here, normally you and the broker split it to some degree. Really not a whole lot there. But I'm sure you can find a way of making it.
Mr. Dale, they didn't teach me how to do cursive growing up, and I'm not even trying to make a joke. I really don't know what, like, I don't know what that is.
Oh, well, it's because of the angle that you're saying. I'll read it. All right, it says, an investor buys two 100-foot lots for $20,000. She divided the two lots into 3 lots. If the lots were sold for $300 per foot, what is the percent of profit? Now, if you've got a calculator in your hand right now, I'm gonna break it.
How do we know? Something's missing, right?
What?
It's 100-foot.
Two 100 lots.
Yeah.
Two 100.
So you're selling the land.
So that means it's 200.
Right.
But 100-foot by what?
That doesn't matter.
Now, when you read that, what's the first thing you see?
And that's
The first thing I say is, what is the percent of profit? If I don't know what the hell they're asking me to find, reading the rest of the question won't do you any good. Now, if I'm not mistaken, if I take what I sold something for and subtract what I paid for it,
You get the.
I would get my profit. Now, is profit based upon what you paid for it or what you sold it for? What you paid for it.
And that's because that's what you have to pay back?
Can't calculate what your profit's gonna be unless you know what. So now, to figure out the percent of profit, I take the profit. I take the profit, I divide it by what I paid for it to get my percent of profit. Now, the question is, what did I pay for it?
40,000.
40,000?
20,000.
No, 20,000.
No, 20,000 each.
So they have
Oh, I
two
see.
each.
So it's 40,000. Why?
I'm gonna change this 300 to 2. All right, so I know that I paid 40,000. I'm sorry, that's what I sold it for. No, that's what I paid
You
for.
bought it for 5.
300 per foot or 200?
No, I'm gonna put this back. All right, to break even, I have to sell it for what? I have to sell it for what?
200.
To break even, what would I have to sell it for?
40,000.
40,000. Now, how much did we sell this thing for? It says it's $300 per foot. How many feet?
100.
100.
200.
So by 2.
Because it says that the vessel buys 2 100-foot lots. I went up and had to put the S back, and you're telling me 100. Okay,
200.
so it's 200 times 300, which gives me, that means my profit. Okay, so my profit is 2,000. What did I pay for it?
40,000.
40,000. That means my profit? 50%. I'll take those all day long.
Yeah.
And twice on Sunday.
Something too.
I even pay a referral fee.
On the review day, are you gonna go over all the equations? Like, are you gonna give a problem for each one of these math?
No? Because I've been giving you problems forever, and you have problems in your book.
Okay, cool.
The examples I put on the board are not by chance. Another very easy problem. But the key is realizing this. Because the answer going the other way will be one of your choices. In other words, if you wind up taking 20,000 divided by 60,000, you're going to get an answer, except it's going to be irrelevant. Because if you think profit's based on what you sold it for, then I take my profits divided by what I sold it for, but that's not correct. Not based on what you sold it for, based on what you paid for it. Questions on this? Moving right along.
Can we do another one or that's it?
And what would another one do?
I don't know, to practice.
You mean if I do the same thing again, that's gonna make a difference? Because I can step up there and change the numbers, guess what? Doesn't mean a damn thing. I go up here and I change all the numbers, this and this are not gonna change. So what you need to do is study your math problems, not punch numbers. I'm telling you, when you pick up that calculator, brain turns off. If you set up the problem and then use your calculator to do what it was designed to do, which was calculate, you'd find your ability to do math problems would go up very quickly. And for those of you that can't quite wrap your hands around that, your brain around that, that's thanks to some teacher you have. Says, you know, especially for girls, my age bracket, you're gonna be a wife and mother, so you don't need to know how to do any of this. I've had people come in class by my age, can't tell you the number of people that made that statement about math. That teacher should be shot. No, maybe not shot.
Drastic, drastic measures.
Anybody have a question? Okay, let's go next. All right, the next part of this gets into the closing statement, which means we get into prorations. Let's go over to 318.
No brackets, nothing
What?
in this page.
Oh, well, you had to start for the
The full.
commission, and then just,
And this is start.
all right, let's go to page 318, starting with line 14, a bracket around the rest of the page.
I'm sorry.
318, where it says closing disclosures, and under that it says prorated items. Let's go 18 to the bottom of the page. When they do these calculations, they always use a calendar year, which means 365. When they tell you that they have to do 3 different prorations on your closing statement, what are prorations done for? Why are we doing these prorations? I don't want to know what they are, I want to know why I have to do them. What's the reason for it?
If there are closing date from that on, the buyer has to pay for those.
No, this is credit.
Equitably distribute the expenses appropriately.
Now I understand why you're so confused. Because if this is the way I'm talking to you, no wonder you're confused. But so far, I'm lost. I remember a teacher told me to go. I had one smart aleck in class who made a comment one day and said, "That teaching's easy, I can do it." I said, "Come on up." You should have seen the look on the other kid's face. Actually, they were drooling like there was a piece of steak walking up to the front. Like he lasted about 3 minutes. He didn't ask me to do it again. Because I knew exactly what was going to happen. The kids were going to have him for lunch as soon as he got to the front of the room. Today, if I did that, I'd probably get fired for abuse or something.
I do that.
It's a proration.
So a proration means it's an item that is either already been paid for, that they both are responsible for, or something that will be paid in the future that they are both responsible for. For example, property taxes. Are property taxes paid in advance or arrears? Meaning?
No, property taxes, they are paid on the end of the year. for
That's
the
arrears.
this year, yeah.
So if we were closing today,
I know.
who's gonna pay the taxes for 2000? Well, you know what, let's not do it today. Okay, I'll explain why later. Let's assume we're closing in the middle of July.
Uh-huh.
Who's gonna pay the taxes for this year?
The
The
seller,
seller, prorated.
No.
The buyer.
the
The
seller.
buyer, they are already there in the,
The closing's in
in
July.
The seller paying for you.
yes, the seller pays for us.
Only if.
And you carry the seller.
Why?
The seller
We pay it,
buys
we just,
for
it's
taxes.
just
November.
Yeah, the buyer.
Do you understand? This group doesn't understand what it means when I answer a question. It doesn't mean it turns into a 15-minute discussion of me listening.
I just don't know when your questions are rhetorical.
It has nothing to do with the fact that you answer the question and shut up. You don't keep talking. It's not a dissertation of the information. If I wanted you to give me an essay, I'd give you a piece of paper and a pen and you could write an essay. This is not an essay class, this is a multiple guess class.
Multiple guess.
Well, for some of you, it's gonna be multiple guess.
I agree.
Taxes are paid at the end of the tax year. So the tax bill that, I just got the tax bill. I know.
So they give you the tax bill?
You know why? Because I don't have to pay it. They do it.
Yeah.
So rather than be all stressed out with what, how much money I
But
have
the
to pay.
tax bill is for the whole year?
Hmm?
It's for the whole year?
Yep. Taxes, here, chapter 18 again, but here's how it goes. Taxes become a lien on your property the 1st of January. The assessment is typically done in August and September. By the middle of October to the beginning of November, you will get the tax bill for this year. You have to pay it by March the 31st of next year, or April the 1st of next year, it becomes delinquent. By paying it early,
You got it.
in November you get a 4% discount, December 3, January 2, February 1, March 100%. And when you get your tax bill, if you look across the bottom of it, it tells you just what I said, but it does it in numbers. Shows you how much to pay in November, December, January, February, March. And then you'll notice it jumps up. So if you really want to know how much your taxes were, you have to look at March. Because February's amount is not the whole amount of taxes, because you're getting a 4% discount. Because the faster they get their money as a county, the better. So, that being said, we're closing July the 14th. Obviously, both parties owe part of those taxes. The seller from January the 1st to July 13th, because the day of closing belongs to the buyer. And the buyer owes it from the 14th to the end of January. I mean, the end of December. Now, who owes who money at this point? Because that'll dictate the credit and the debit.
So
The seller owns money to
owns
the buyer.
until,
Well, here's what I have to think. Who's gonna pay the taxes? The buyer. Well, then, either I wait until November and have the seller send me a check, or I take it with me now. Which one probably makes the most sense?
Take it out.
So that means I have to figure out how much of the taxes are due by the seller, which means that the tax year starts January the 1st, and we're closing July the 14th. That means that the seller owes more than half the taxes. So any answer that doesn't show a debit seller, credit buyer for more than half the taxes could not be a correct answer. I can answer most proration questions without picking up a pen or a pencil, especially when they do debit credit. Because if they do debit seller, credit buyer, or credit buyer, debit seller, whichever way they do it, one of them's going to be right, and at least two of them are going to be wrong. I know that the amount I'm prorating is more than half the year's taxes. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So if, let's say, the taxes are $1,200, $100 a month, that means the amount of money that the seller has to give the buyer is more than half $1,200. So any answer that's less than half would be wrong. It's called concept. It's not called arithmetic. Math is not arithmetic. Math is what I just did. The justification for it. That's what you need to study. Because once you get that, it doesn't matter what the numbers are. If I told you we closed in April, I know it's going to be debit seller and credit buyer, but the seller's portion is going to be the small side this time because it's April. But the first thing I had to understand is that the tax year went from January to December, which means that the person that's actually going to pay the whole bill is going to be our buyer. The seller simply has to cough up his or her portion from January to the day before closing.
So, I'm just confused. The bill you just got this week
Mhm.
for your,
It's for 2017.
so it's the year that's almost over.
Yeah.
And we're talking about closing next year?
No?
Or we closed earlier this year?
Yes.
Okay, that's why I was confused.
Anybody else?
How do you know what the taxes are gonna be in 2017 if they
You
don't?
don't. If you read your contract, the contract tells you how they calculate it. That you can contact the property appraiser, you can estimate it based upon last year. So actually the contract, there's a paragraph in the contract, page 7 or 8, that specifically addresses that issue in regard to the contract. And you also sign an agreement at closing that says if these prorations are greatly different from what they turn out to be than what was estimated, the parties agree to make an adjustment.
But those taxes are included in the monthly payment,
Right.
so what do I have to worry about?
Well, I need the seller's portion of it.
Okay, that is the only thing I need to be worried about.
Yeah, because,
Is whatever they owe me.
yeah.
Okay.
The formula I just put on the board is the formula for all prorations.
What's the
This buyer or seller days. Before I forget, page 319, a bracket from line 10 to the bottom of the page.
Days in month of the year?
4 years. Some prorations are monthly, some prorations are annual. Now, tell me what information they would have to give me. What are you trying to see?
The last one, I know it says something credit behind it.
Debit / credit. Because one person's gonna get the debit and the other person's gonna get the credit.
What do you want us to do in 2019?
And the second one is times what?
Times.
Or
Buyers or sellers days.
What do you want us to do in 2019?
Highlight, I put a bracket around lines 10 to the bottom of the page. That's what we're doing right now. Now, what information do they have to give me? They have to give me the closing date. What else?
Tax amount.
the tax amount?
The amount prorated. Wouldn't necessarily have to be taxed. Okay, so let's do that. Let's have a closing on now. Are they gonna have to tell me that number every problem?
Yes.
Yeah, because without that, I have no basis for doing any prorations.
Are you gonna tell us how many days of the year that is?
Yeah, I did that. 365, unless they tell you otherwise.
No,
And what-
I was wondering if you were gonna tell us what May 12th was in terms of number of days.
Huh? Say that again?
Is it?
How many
is May
days
12th
of
Is May 12th the 118th day of the year,
What, this?
May 12, 2017.
I'm not following what you're asking. Let me work the problem, and then we'll revisit that. What else do I need to know if I'm doing taxes?
And then how much you have to pay?
Okay, so the first thing I would do is, I would take 1,200, divide it by,
365.
because taxes are annual, and that will give me the daily rate. Can somebody please, to 4 places, tell me what that is?
Is 3.38.
What's after the 8?
7.
So,
What's after the 7?
29.
What's after the 7?
6.
So you need 4 decimals after the 3.
Yes,
Is there a reason for that?
because I said so.
That works.
so that's the 67, so.
So we need
7.
4 digits.
Okay, Mom.
Don't ask if you don't want to know.
Yes, Mom, I like it.
Now, you know what I know? This answer is less than 600. I already know it's a debit seller credit buyer. Because I know that the seller needs to give the seller's portion of the taxes to the buyer so the buyer can pay the whole thing
I'll know that.
in the lumber.
So it's only 5.
So I already know this is debit seller credit buyer. Any answer that doesn't show it that way is automatically eliminated. Now all I'm going to do is stick the numbers in. Now, you have to be careful counting the numbers. It's easy to make a careless mistake. You use the timeline. For taxes, this would be January the 1st to December the 31st. I know that the day of closing is less than half a month. I know that closing is 512, which goes on the buyer's side. So the seller's got January, February, March, April.
I have 14.
And
No.
11 days.
May 11.
So I do May and then 11 more?
No.
No.
No,
that would be
11
30
days of
too much.
May.
No.
All right, so this is 31, 28,
And then.
28,
31,
31,
30,
That's exactly right.
April 30.
Then you have to figure it out.
January, February, March, April, 30, and 11. 11.
Say 31 minus 12.
You're smart.
Minus
and that leaves me with?
is 19.
There's 13.
31 plus 28 plus 31 plus.
Is it 131?
Yes.
Is that right? 131? Now, let me ask a question, is that like half a year, less than half a year?
Yeah.
So I got another indicator that my answer is less than $1,200.
Makes sense. $100.
So now I take the 131 times that number, it gives me,
$430, 68. 130,
430,
30, and 68 cents.
I'm not worried about the 130. If I get you that close, I'll be real happy. Now, I got something bad to tell you.
We'll all agree.
Every time you work a tax proration problem, you have to work it the same way. It doesn't make a damn what the numbers are. The first thing you do is take the amount prorated, divide it by the days in the year, and get the daily rate. The second thing you do is set up this chart and count the buyer seller's days from January 1st. And then multiply, because you already know it's debit, seller, credit, buyer. And if they're using more than just numbers in the answer, you're going to eliminate at least one, if not two, answers just because of the fact that it's debit, seller, credit, buyer.
Debit.
Which means the seller is giving money to the buyer.
Do we have to put that, exactly?
You have to mark the right answer.
Okay.
No, I understand.
That I know.
Face after. He looks so fed up with life. Oh my God.
No, but what I'm saying is, if you have a problem, would you ask that if it's the seller debit or the buyer debit or the seller or?
Well, that makes question. Did I put it up in an example?
Yes.
I didn't do it for my health. I did it for yours.
Is it an example because of the dates that you chose? Is it always gonna be that way?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you choose a day and if you choose a day somewhere in the middle of May and you're dealing with $1,200, the answer's gonna be somewhere around 430 if you do it 1,000 times. Because I know that answer was less than 600 before I even started. But because May doesn't take me to the middle of the year.
That wasn't the question. If you do it any time during the year, is that gonna be possible?
Is what gonna be possible?
The formula that you gave me,
This?
the.
Yes.
Wait a minute.
The debit.
I'm getting tired of the fact that somebody asked me a question and I have to listen to you answer it. If I wanted you to answer, I would have asked you. I'm sorry.
I
Go
guess the
ahead.
question is, will there ever be a credit to the seller? I
Yes.
guess that's the question. Will
Yes.
there- Okay, that's really it.
If they had already paid the taxes and it's December the 23rd that you're closing, and the seller's already paid the taxes, then the buyer would owe the seller back those few days in December. As far as test question, you're pretty close to zero that they're gonna go that way with it. That would only happen if you close in November or December. And what happens in real life is they simply take the portion that would be the seller's responsibility and the portion that would be the buyer's responsibility, and they pay the taxes. Because by November, we know how much the tax bill is gonna be. So the closing agent simply pulls from the seller their money and pulls from the buyer their portion of the money and pays the taxes.
If it's closed, the closing is in October 31st. So it's not the same thing. That if it's in November.
What's next?
Next is rent. On page 320,
You know?
starting with line 10, 31,
What page?
page 320,
I wanna see it.
starting with the chart,
I will,
Okay.
and I'll sell you your next house.
to the bottom of the page, line
Sorry, can you
31.
say the page again, please?
Yes, it's page 320. Starting with the proration in the gray box. You know what, no, that was from before. Starting with line 14 where it says prepaid rent. Through the gray box at the top of the next page.
Just right.
Start.
Oh, is it not?
No, I just said that. Okay. We're closing on May the 12th. The rent, which has already been collected by the seller, is $900 a month. Which obviously means I'm buying a unit from that seller. They have a tenant in there that's paying $900 a month. Is rent paid in advance or arrears? Advance, because you normally pay it the first of the month. I'm looking at this problem. And the buyer should be entitled to probably somewhere around $600. Because I know that the buyer's entitled to more than half the rent. How do I know that? Because closing is the 12th. That leaves 18 days, or 19 days actually, that belong to the buyer. So I know my answer has got to be more than $450. Because that would be more than half the month. Let's see if it's true. The item prorated is rent. And it's $900. The days in the month, in this case, are 31 because this is May. That gives me a daily rate, please.
2903.
I'm sorry?
2903.
2903.
Can you kind of round it off or no?
Where's the decimal?
After 29?
29.032.
Say it in back.
You need 4 decimal.
102.
So basically, we're looking at $29 a day. We're rounding things up. So I gotta give the, let's see, let's go back and set up our thing. This would be May the 1st to May the 31st. Day of closing is the 12th, which means the buyer
19.
is 19. Nope. The seller's last day is what? 11.
No, but it's 31, so it's
20.
19.
Well, if the seller's last day is the 11th, how many days left in the month?
20.
20, thank you. Because the day of closing always belongs to the buyer. See, that's why I put I put both the seller's last day and the buyer's first day, so I don't make that mistake.
20 times
Easy to make if you're not careful.
29. 508.
508.
And this,
508.
20, it comes out to 580?
580, 65 cents.
580 and
She did it with
6
6.
for 6. 6 for 6. 646.
6
6
for 6.
for, it's a 6 for 6, so it's 6 for 5.
65.
Yeah.
Well, what did I say between,
600.
is the debit and credit right?
No, it's for the buyer. Credit for the buyer, yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, again, does the seller owe the buyer money?
Yeah.
Yes, almost $600. So if the seller owes it to the buyer, how do you take it away from them? You make it a debit. How do you give it to them? You make it a credit. What that does is it moves it from one side of the closing statement to the other. All right, the rent proration also has a star. The one we just did.
Oh, that is, this is the one.
I got a question about that.
Yes.
I understand that the seller has the benefit of 11 days of the revenue, but he owes the buyer for 20. So is just that credit go to the buyer?
Well, yeah, I show, on the seller shop side, I would show the $580 as a debit.
Okay,
I would show that same $580 on the buyer side as a credit,
okay.
which means we took it away from the seller as a debit and gave it to the buyer as a credit.
Where I got confused is I didn't think we cared about the first 11 days. And that's.
Well, we only carry about the first 11 days, so we don't make the mistake and use
Right.
19 days instead of 20,
Right, got
and
it.
fail the state exam by 1 point.
Yeah, that'd be terrible.
So in this case, that's $580 is credited to the buyer.
Yes.
Seller,
Oh, we like that.
Page 322. All right, I need everybody's attention, I need it right now. On page 322, starting with line 1. Put a bracket around the rest of the page. Next page. Bracket 323, whole page bracketed. Page 324. From the top of the page to line 22. And then I want you to put a star on 324, 323, and 322.
So it's one long star.
Whole page.
Because those 3 pages deal with the transfer taxes and real property. Something that will affect every one of your transactions. If it's a sale.
Are we using our other book?
Yeah. When I get to it. Now, for a moment, please just sit back and watch. No highlighting, no writing, I'll give you a chance to do it. Is it a sin to have to pay taxes? And it's a bigger sin if you don't.
Yes.
There are 3 things about these taxes that you have to know. Number 1, who pays them? By law, the law doesn't care who pays them, but there's a norm as to who pays them. The second thing is what rate they're paid at. And the third thing you have to know is what is it paid, are they paid on? Now, who moves out of the house, or who sells the house? Seller. Who moves into the house? Okay. That eliminates one problem. So now we're down to 2 things I have to remember. This is 70 cents per 100 or fraction I don't care if they call it the purchase price, the selling price, it's the price. The second one, which is the intangible tax, is 0.002 times any new mortgages. And the third one is the note tax. It's 35 cents per 100 or fraction of new or assumed mortgages.
So if you pay cash, you don't pay those bond too.
Correct. The one you always pay, even if it's just a recorded deed, because you remember the deed I gave you with the Lady Bird? There was a 70 cents charge for the state tax on deed, because there was no money that passed hands there. But that tax always has to be paid, and it's a minimum of 70 cents.
Does it matter what county you're in?
These are state taxes. Now, the hardest thing to remember, in my mind, is the rates. because I know that the intangible note taxes deal with finance. I know that the state tax on deed deals with selling price. So if I can remember the three rates, I might have a shot at this. Are you ready? There's only one number you have to remember, and that's the 70. Because half of it is 35. That'll sink in on the way home. Okay, this group, I'm not sure. So that takes care of the rates. So if I get started right, I'm in good shape. Because you got 72 and 35. Now, I'm going to show you the whole 9 yards. They may not ask you all of it. They may set up a scenario and ask you the intangible tax on the new mortgage. So if they're asking me for the intangible tax on the new mortgage, I have to find out in the question, are there any new mortgages? Now, the odds are, if they're going to ask me to do this tax, there's going to be at least one of them. But key is, you have to remember this. Don't remember this, doesn't matter how it works. Now, let's set up a scenario here. Let's say we have a selling price of $85,240. We've got a down payment of $15,000. We've got a first assumed mortgage of $25,250. We have a second new mortgage at $35,000. And we have a second new mortgage of $29,410. The balance will be paid in cash at closing. What are the total transfer taxes? Now, what I just did is the max problem. Like I said, you very well may not be asked to do more than one of them. The one thing they don't tell me, no matter what they ask me to do, is what's on that mortgage. I have to know this. I would like to show you the structure that I use to set these up. First thing I would do is I would go into the question and I would take it line by line, looking for anything that might have a tax on it. The first thing I went into in this one is what? What's the first thing I had?
70
purchase.
The selling price. Is there a tax on the price?
Yes.
Yeah, 70%.
You sure? You sure?
Yeah.
I'm not sure of anything.
What's that say right there?
Of the price.
What's that say right there? Is that the price? Well, what do you think it is?
So are you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay. What is your question? 70% of fraction of the price?
Is that the price?
Yeah, it seems like.
Okay, so is there a
it seems like-
tax on the price?
Of course, there's always taxes.
That's not what I asked. My question was, is there a tax on the price?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I want to know. It's the state tax on D. And it's on 85,000 what?
240.
Is there a tax on the down payment of 15,000?
No.
How do you know that? Because it doesn't say so.
Doesn't say so.
Is there a tax on the first assumed mortgage?
No.
The new mortgage, yes.
No,
Yes.
the new mortgage,
Yes.
not new.
Yes.
Yes.
It's assumed.
And you know when a mortgage
Ah, yeah,
is
yeah,
assumed,
that's true.
they always pay a new note tax.
Take it.
So I've got the note tax on
29,410.
25,250.
Sorry, 25.
That takes care of that one. Now, the second mortgage is what?
Yeah.
It's new.
Yeah.
How many taxes are on new mortgages?
0.
2.
Yeah.
New mortgage, new mortgage. So you have both an intangible tax and a note tax. Why? Because you have both a note and the mortgage on a new financing. On a refinance, all you have is a new note. That's why we only pay the note tax. All right, so we come back over
Can you
here.
just repeat that?
Yeah. Let me just set this in here quick. Is there anything else over here?
No.
Anything else over here?
No.
No.
Okay. So now I can go back and work the problem. Now, what I said to you was this. When I looked at that first mortgage, it said it was assumed. It didn't say it was new. Which means if it's assumed, you take a note, you sign a new note, so there's a tax on that new note. In the second one, it was new. No, it was not assumed. If it's a new, you can't assume something's new.
Right.
A new note creates a new mortgage.
Right. Okay.
So if it's new financing, you got both taxes. Because you'll have a note obligating the borrower and the mortgage putting the property up as collateral. Now, I want to show you something here before we do the numbers. Now, it says that, you know, on this thing, like the state tax on deed says 70 cents per hundred. Or fraction.
Fraction.
Is there a fraction of a $100 bill here? The answer is yes. This is not rounding.
No?
Any part of $100 bill creates another $100 bill. So if that had been 80,000 and 1 cent, that 1 cent would represent a fraction, which means you pay another 70 cents. Now, easy way to do this. Watch what I do. If it's 70 cents per 100, I have to divide by 100. Would everybody agree with that? All right, watch me divide by 100. It moves the decimal 2 places to the left.
Because it's only 2 decimals, so over.
Now, do I have a fraction?
Yes.
Because $40 is a fraction of $100. That means I have to add one more 100. So it's 853 times 70 cents.
Oh my God.
If I made that 4 a 0, everybody, look at me. If I made that 4 a 0, would there be a fraction of a $100 bill?
No.
And so therefore, the answer would have been 852. A fraction is anywhere from 1 penny to $99.99. Because you had a fraction there, and the fraction was $40. Let me try it a different way. If once you draw the line to find your hundreds, if there's a digit here that's not 0, add a 1. So if that was 83, I'd add 1. Because 83 is a fraction of a $100 bill. Now, the note tax that we had to pay on the second one, it works the same way. $50 is a fraction of a $100 bill. So I add 1. I'm back at 253 times 35 cents. The intangible tax is the hard one. It's 0.002 times the mortgage, which I think is 58.82. Double check. Now, here's another problem. The calculating of a note tax is the same way every time. So the first thing I do is find a hundreds. Do I have a fraction of a $100 bill? Anything from 1 penny to $99.99 on this side of that line creates another fraction. So 295 times 35. You'll notice that the first thing I did with this problem is I set up the 4 of them. Once I got it set up, and notice when I say set up, all the way down to this point, I don't need a calculator to figure out any of that. I just apply the concept to it. Then when I get to this point, now is when I need my calculator. But I set all 4 of these up like you saw. Then my calculator, it's amazing my calculator seems to get the right answer when I set up the formula. It's amazing. But again, that over there is not the key. So, people that missed this on the class test, missed it because of this, not because of that. So maybe I should practice on a piece of scratch paper doing what? Writing this. Because if I can get this down, I've got everything I need. It's like I got the book in front of me. If you want to get better at math, you have to realize that it's math and not arithmetic. Without this, that means nothing. But that's always where everybody's focused.
Numbers.
Not numbers. Questions? Okay, one more thing and we'll take a look at this book. Bottom of page 325.
Rules of thumb.
On the bottom of 325, lines 20 through 26 for the bracket. Under the lines 21 and 22, it says items credited to the seller. And the first one there is the total purchase price. That is the start.
You say 20.
Bottom of 325. Lines 21 and 22. Continuing on 326. Bracket the whole page.
Stop.
On line 20 and 19 for the start.
In the 326?
On 326, lines 19 and 20. Everybody signed in today?
Yes, sir.
There any stars there?
Yes. 19 and 20.
All right, take out your booklet, please. Your other book. You don't have one with you? I'm going with somebody else. Now, what I want to do here in the next 3 or 4 minutes, yeah, couple of them. The first thing, if you haven't already done it, is in near the first front of the book, there's a section on test-taking strategies. Recommend that you read through that a few times. You can probably see some of the things we've talked about in that list. Now, the first part of the book, once you get past that, just flip through until you get to the beginning of the book. Now, the first part of this actually probably the middle part of this book is an outline of the textbook. So I would choose the textbook over that. Let's move forward.
You would use the, choose the textbook.
Section 1.
Yes.
Mr. Dale,
Yes.
are these books good for 2018, or is there going to be the next, like the 41st edition for 2018?
It'll be the 41st edition.
Yeah, all right, I was just making sure.
Now, on page 123. 123.
Right.
From 123 123 to 165 is a series of questions. There's close to 400 of them. Right after that, the last page, there's a section on the map. You know, do that at your own risk. But 123 to 165.
Stop.
That's what we need to go.
Well, for the state exam, yes, it's a start.
Oh, so this is what we studied for the state exam.
That's why it says examine.
So we should focus on those pages.
Huh?
We should focus on those pages.
Yes. Now, there's an answer key in the back. What's nice about the answer key is they give you explanations for each answer. Now, I know for some of you that's going to be rather difficult because you will not agree with their interpretation. And if that's the case, lose my phone number.
Can I call you and ask her? Sarah?
Ask Sarah.
Sarah is not available.
All right, so first we got 123 to 165. Right after 167 starts the math problems. If you'll move through that to page 181.
So from 167 to 181.
Yeah, that's all the math stuff. But if you go to what was that number?
167.
All right, 167. On 167, it says 100 multiple question, choice question, exam 1. After that is exam 2. So you have approximately 500 questions there. Between the first one that's 123 to 165, and then the ones that you have the two quizzes. And again, the answers to those are in the back with explanations.
I just fill in the answer.
What this shows me is this gonna be the format of the questions in the test?
Yeah, multiple choice.
Those are the topics.
If in preparing for the state exam, and you have any questions, you do have my contact information. Feel free to use it if you need to.
How late at night can we call you?
Wait, you ever seen that State Farm?
Definitely,
Yeah, what are you wearing? Khakis?
Well,
All right,
let's see.
then.
My rate past 7 o'clock is $1,000 limit. So you call all you want. Just make sure that you dial the 900 number and give your credit card.
All right, boss, take care.
You have to have an answer to that.